Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Bosch Legacy Season 2, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So once again, let's start off with the Maddie stuff, just because it's kind of like what's freshest in my mind immediately. Maddie's got to deal with quite a bit. Obviously, words kind of gotten out about her dad. Was it going basically dark side, like once again the term for him working with a defense lawyer, which once again we've seen Bosch kind of give and kind of look at cops a certain way working with defense and stuff like that. Now he's on this side of things. Once again, he's not a cop. It still irks his nerve that he's being treated this way, but also at the same time, Bosch is like, yeah, let people say whatever they're going to say. I know exactly what they're going to say, but he knows it's going to fall back on Maddie being his daughter too. We didn't see that this episode because I think a majority of people aren't stupid enough to kind of take it out on Maddie, but there are going to be people who are stupid enough who will, so we'll probably see more of that in the future season, but I mean, not in the future season, but more later on in this season. We'll have to wait and see. But other than that, Maddie's dealing with, once again, the victim impact statement. And in fact, a lady, Anna, who kind of represents, like, who kind of responds to stuff like that, I think she keeps in touch with the victims and stuff. She wants to talk to Maddie, and I thought was this episode really, like, it's a lot of speculation on my part about what Maddie was feeling. This episode really gives you an idea. The moment Anna was like, oh yeah, you and the other victims, she's like, I'm not a victim. They are victims of me. Because by acknowledging, I mean, and that's a psychology that anyone would deal with. It's not just a Maddie situation. No one wants to view themselves as a victim, because once you do, it makes what you went through that much more real. And also and it was something Bosch had talked to Maddie before, where she was like, I got lucky. He was like, but don't undermine, undervalue, or not undervalue, but what was it? Don't undermine what you went through. She's like, I get it. I don't. What happened to me was terrible, but I got off lucky. But it still doesn't, once again, it still doesn't take away from her experience and the fear and the desperation she felt. I mean, she didn't know if anyone was going to be able to help her. She thought she might die. So, and I talked about that in the previous episode, she hasn't properly dealt with anything. Once again, I don't know for sure if the impact statement is going to be the end all be all. Like I said, I feel like it might be the first steps in the right direction, but obviously it's like because she hasn't decided whether or not she wants to do the impact statement or not. And even Anna was like, you don't have to do it. You just have to tell us what you want to do. And the thing is, for Maddie, she actually doesn't know what she wants to do. And I think what's really, because once again, it's that thing of she wants to put this all behind her, and it just keeps coming up, and so she's kind of avoiding it because I thought was this, because first and foremost, she's having nightmares about it still. She finally opens it, because I didn't even talk about it last episode when she went for a run at the beginning of the episode, because like Rico's like, why are you up at like 4 in the morning? She's like, I might as well get started on it, because she couldn't sleep. Fact of the matter is, even though Rico's there, she probably puts it under her own pillow, the pillow she sleeps on. Because at least when she was back living with her dad, she put it on the pillow beside her. But now Rico's there, she probably makes a point to hide it. Because I don't know. Because I'm sure it's still there. Maybe she feels a little better with someone there by her side. But either way, she's daydreaming about it, and she's losing focus, and because she's not talking to anybody about it. She's not talking to her dad about it. It's just because, once again, once you talk about it, you make it real. And she had this really interesting conversation with Chandler, and I think out of anyone, Chandler could it's not the exact same situation, but Chandler had her issues with Carl Rogers, so she knows what it's like to be a victim of someone's like crime or whatever, like he attempted to have you killed. And, and obviously she had carried that obviously into season 1 of the series. And she still kind of is dealing with it. Even though he's dead, it doesn't kind of erase those scars. It doesn't erase that pain. She has to live with that and just has to find a way moving forward with it. But Maddie had this really interesting conversation with Chandler about how she's so conflicted, because it's like, all right, so if I go up there on the stand and tell my entire truth about how like fucked up I feel, in all my honesty, she's worried of what that might mean, that like, oh, they might decide like, oh, I'm not in a good enough state to continue doing my job, and other cops will look at me a certain way, will probably look at her like a victim, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't bring her on the force, like she might not be mentally all there, like it might have her faculties all together considering the things she's going through. But it's like, if I go up there and half-ass my statement, then what would be even the point of it? Because if I'm not there, what about the victims of Doc Weiler's that couldn't show up? I need to be there for their behalf. And she's so torn. And Chandler says, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. You don't owe anything to anyone. You know, whether you do this or not, at the end of the day, it has to be your decision. And if it's what you want. Because Chandler was even kind of saying something along the lines of, it's not like it's going to make everything perfectly okay. But at the very least, you can take steps to getting something back. And so ultimately, Maddie goes to the impact statement. She doesn't have it written down. Maybe she wrote it down, but she wasn't reading from it. She spoke her heart about what she went through, what she experienced, what he did, and made it clear, like, oh, he tried to use me as an LAPD officer, tried to use me as a bargaining chip to lessen his sentence as a kidnapper, and not for the crimes of what he actually is, a serial rapist. Like, she's like, let's not even mince words. That's what you are. That's who you are. And the fact is, of like the terrible things he did to his victims, even her being like, I'm lucky. But the fact is that he waited in my home, he attacked me, drugged me out there into the desert, and then drugged me again, put me in a makeshift coffin, and I'm only alive by a miracle. And she's talking about like the effect that this had on her family and friends, but she's lucky enough to have them by her side. But she's also like, I'm lucky that he didn't assault me the way he did so many other women and what they went through. And kind of turning to him, Doc Weiler, and is like, look at me. The fact of the matter is, we are not what you did to us. Like, that doesn't define us. You know, you are just an evil thing we were unlucky to experience in our life. That's all you'll ever be. But you have to live with what you are, because that is who you are. You are a monster. You're a rapist. And that fact is, you have to live with that for the rest of your life. And I hope terrible things happen to you in prison, you know? And, he like looks at her. He had this very like, it feels like he's almost got this look in his eyes, almost like he's trying to be sympathetic, having this puppy dog look to his eyes almost. But there's also this like blankness to it where it's like, all right, whatever. It's like there's no remorse in his eyes, you know? There's that moment, like, to me it looked like he was trying to look, I'm so sorry, but it's also like, it does feel like there's also nothing behind his eyes, no like remorse. But for Maddie, it felt good. Like, for her it felt like it was all worth it, because even Bosch is like, because she was saying to Bosch like, that fear you had of like me not coming back home, like, has this helped that in any way? It's like, truth be told, is like, that feeling is never going to go away, but it's eased up a little bit today. And for Maddie, it's like, yeah, this was a good day in this regard. So, and you could tell like her whole demeanor changes when she goes back. Even talking to Rico, she's going to finally move out. She's finally able to kind of take those steps forward, because I think it is that thing of, she was a little scared to be on her own again. I mean, he took that safety, that security from her. But now it's like, no, I'm going to go off and find my own place. And it's okay. Like, I need to do this on my own. And even talking to Vasquez, who's like, you know, you can talk to me about anything, right? And she's like, no, I know. So they kind of had a little bump this episode, just because, I mean, once again, Maddie was kind of dealing with everything. Plus it's like, oh, I'm not going to mention your dad and the whole, dark side thing. It's like, yeah, but you just did. So that wasn't her trying to really bring it up, but it's kind of like, hey, don't get it. I don't, because initially I kind of probably took it the wrong way too, where I was like, was that kind of like an underhanded shot? But it's like, no, it was her being trying. That was her way of saying like, no, Maddie, I want you to know I got your back. I'm not getting so caught up in that like, oh, dark side bullshit like anyone else would. But I think that's what that conversation was meant to come full circle. Like, I just want you to know, like, I'm here to talk to you. You can always rely on me. I got your back. And she's like, no, I know you do. I know I can always have you to rely on and talk to. So it is kind of nice to have that person, because I'm sure it's their dynamic. I mean, it's not a 1-to-1, but I'm sure it's supposed to be kind of that parallel to Jerry and Harry's relationship and partnership. Then we get back to the Mo situation, getting a little more time between him and Jessica Camacho's character's name. I don't think they've actually said it in the episode. I don't know if there's going to be significance in it, but I did see, like, from the x-ray of the episode, her character's name is Jade. I'm not going to say her last name because it might have some significance, but her name's Jade. And so they're hanging out in a bar, and we kind of find out that she's not really, she's had a little bit of a hacker history, but really, like, it's mainly like I do podcasts about them. But she has an ex-boyfriend that she broke up with like a year ago, but he's holding like some kind of I think it was like family medical records or something against her, and they could like kind of really screw up and derail her life. So Mo's going to like, he wants to act upon this and he wants to help. I also love that Bosch is asking him to look into all these like phone calls that Lexi had gotten. He was like, yo, you do know I have a life, like what do you take me for, like some kind of loser with no life? And he's like, it answers itself. I was like, come on, Bosch. But it's like, right, I mean, I think that's almost supposed to be like this meta thing of we are getting more of Mo having a life, even though like all we've ever really seen of him so far in this series was him working with Bosch. So it's like, doesn't have that real work life. But I mean, he kicks back, we'll listen to his music, but we haven't really seen his social life until these past two episodes, this episode and last episode. But I loved his infiltration of the building. I love that. And it's just like him being like that inspector guy. And I honestly really like the back and forth between him and the guy. Especially when it's like, oh, do you have any kids? He's like, no. You? So yeah, maybe someday. But I got a whole bunch of like nieces and nephews because my sister has 4 kids, and he shows them off. It's like, oh, that must be a lot of energy. And it's like, oh, tell me about it. It's like, even though he's so good with it, I was like, this is, I actually really like you and this guy's back and forth. It's like, I think that speaks volumes about Mo's social skills. It's like, man, I mean, because he's like, I'm a very introverted person, but my dad's, I mean, a lot of my family, especially my sisters, are a lot more extroverted than me. I always compare a lot of people to my dad who are very extroverted, because my dad will talk to any and everyone about anything. That's just always how he's been. And I'm very envious of that aspect about him. And Mo's kind of got that energy. I mean, it makes sense. Like, you're playing this role, so you kind of go all in. But it kind of feels like, I mean, because obviously what immediately comes to my head is like, I think of leverage. It felt like a very like leveraged job, and just the back and forth, it felt like something you see like, honestly, like, I mean, there's a lot of parallels you could draw between Hardison and Mo, in particular. But I love that whole back and forth, and he's like, oh, I'm walking past this thing. He's like, wait, aren't you gonna sign that like thing? He's like, gotcha. He's like, oh, I was walking right past it, and most people just kind of let me. I was testing to see how far you let me go. He's like, oh, you won't get past me? He's like, good man. I'm like, he adjusts on the fly to the whole situation. It's actually pretty dope. Luckily, it ended up being a great success. He ended up being able to kind of have a backdoor into the system, which the whole situation just makes me feel more and more reluctant to trust her now. Because I'm like, oh, now that you kind of planted the seeds, now I'm like, are we going to find out it's 100% BS? Like, there is no X and all that, like, it's complete. Like, is there an actual X and you're going to, like, take something from him because that's what this was all about? Or is it just a thing of, no, you're not going to, like, there is no X at all, and this was just you either, like, trying to do a trial run with Mo, where they're going to use him for content or something for the podcast? I have no idea. It feels like it's real, but I'm also pessimistic. Where I'm just kind of like, I'm scared and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I brought it up, I wasn't sure where this storyline was going, because we are getting Mo his own story this season. I'm like, not sure where that's really going to go after this. I mean, because he let Jade know about, like, okay, I got into the files and stuff like that. We can erase, like, what we need to kind of cover you, and so we can get back at your ex. So where things go from there, I don't know. But like I said, this episode definitely creaked in my mind of, like, feels like she might be using him, but we'll have to wait to see if that ends up being the case or not, whether she has some ulterior motives or not. Obviously, Matthew, it gets revealed to Matthew that he's been found out by Bosch and Chandler. It makes sense. Like they sent him a text, which was how the FBI kind of like gives him a very nonchalant text to make it like, oh, like gives him a certain message to let him know like, oh, come meet. Makes sense. Mo's tapped to his phone, so all they had to do was like copy it, and yeah, he thought he was meeting with the FBI, and he just once he saw them, he just so disappointed himself because like, okay, I've been caught, I'm busted. So it's like, right. He slipped up when he was being interrogated initially and questioned by the FBI. They found out he was lying, and he put himself in deeper trouble because of it. So he told them some things, but not everything. It's like, right, I got the blueprints from a phone that you had like sent to me, but he's like, where the location of the phone is and beyond all that, I have no idea, which is true. So he doesn't know everything. He knows enough that could obviously put them in a situation that they're currently in, but he doesn't have enough to, or know enough to fully bury them. But even Bosch is like, do you trust him? And Chandler's like, no. I'm like, he felt very sincere, like he was very apologetic. It is just kind of like, right, you were looking out for yourself. But it's like, you should have come to Chandler about it because he didn't handle, like, because I don't know if Matthew's even like, I know he's like working with Chandler, but is he like a paralegal and not like a full lawyer? Like, I mean, once again, it's like once you're kind of under the pressure of it, if you're like, Chandler can handle it because she's a boss, but it's like if you're just kind of someone who can crack under the pressure, I would probably crack under the pressure and mess up and lie. But it's like you need to be as honest as possible in those situations because being caught in a lie will fuck you over tenfold in that situation. So I don't know. He felt sincere, but Chandler's probably right not to trust him because he is looking out for his best interest because, hey, he's only being like so upfront and everything now because he got caught. He could have been upfront with you before now, but it's not until you caught him. So it's like, once again, it's still like, I'm not doing this. I'm only pretending. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll go back to the FBI and whatever they tell me, I'll pass on you. It's like, who's ever kind of got him by the balls, and the FBI had him by the balls, but now they do. He's even saying like, oh, am I fired? She's like, yeah, I'll figure it out, but you kind of be our inside man for a while. So we'll see where things kind of end up for Matthew at the end of this. I could definitely see Chandler firing him because it's like, because you can't ever fully trust him again. So maybe that'd be something you'd keep in mind of like, well, you can work here, but eventually I will probably have to fire you. If you stay here, I will always distrust you to some extent. I will always have to have someone keep an eye on. Because obviously Marty doesn't know about everything with Matthew because her and Bosch are playing super close to the vest. So Bosch ends up meeting up with Pierce and Vega for a little bit in the episode, which Vega's kind of telling Pierce, the more you help him out, the more there's going to be kind of strings attached going forward. So I don't know if it's because of the whole like dark side thing of like if they get caught working alongside of him. I mean, for one, he's outside the department, so there's probably that angle to it. But also we'll be doubly screwed over reputation wise if people find out we're working alongside the guy who's also working alongside the defense in this situation. So they end up finding out about James, that the person, like when he was strangled, there was no defense or anything. So when the wire was around his neck, which kind of makes him think like, okay, later on Bosch is talking to Chandler about it, like most likely he was drugged before he was like strangled because there doesn't seem to be any form of like he put up any form of defense. So then it turns out, like, right, the room he was in was kind of cleaned up because there was, like, what was it, condoms and stuff, or his stuff that wasn't there when Bosch and Chandler went. But then we find out, like, a guy from the club who was his buddy who was like, oh, yeah, I didn't really get in too much of my bro's business about what he was up to. But I knew like he was, with his clients and stuff, but I didn't like judge him or anything like that. But it's like, yeah, he grabbed all of James' stuff after he died. He wants to hand it over to his family, but it's also like, if I hand it over, it makes it really real that he's gone. So he doesn't quite know what to do, which led to Bosch talking to Matt and finding out what happened. All Matt could remember was like, right, he didn't see the car. He just saw he heard a lowrider type of vehicle, and that was it. So after a few minutes, he ended up leaving. Bosch ended up going to investigate where James' body was left. Heard from a witness that they heard 2 car doors. So now it's like, okay, so we potentially have 2 killers. He did at one point ask someone to keep an eye out for, like, was it CTE? And he's like, it's a long shot, but it might explain how David's like DNA got all over Lexi, which Chandler did go to court because they tried to screw over Bosch because specifically it was Vince kind of bringing up a whole thing about like making it so that anything Bosch found, he got it by illegal means. It's like, no, Bosch handled things properly because, yes, he did actually use his name, so it's not like he was there under fully deceitful terms. Yes, he didn't reveal himself as a detective and came there under the pretense, but it's still a legal, not as shady pretense as they're trying to make it out to be. So anything he discovered, and he can still be used as like a witness and stuff, and it's part of this investigation. So, but the judge in particular wants this to be open and shut because everything looks like it's aiming for David. So to the point they want to give him a charge, what was it, like 15 to life with a chance of parole or something like that. But Chandler doesn't want David to take it, but part of him's like, yeah, but if I go to trial, it's like, it'll be a lot worse if you go to trial, because they're only coming up with this deal and nothing more. But Chandler brings up a good point of, if you plead guilty, you're going to have to deal with that for the rest of your life. Your friends, your family, anyone that meets you will always be like, did he do it? I mean, the sad thing is, even if he was found not guilty, there'd still be a little bit of that, because it's like, that's always that hard thing of like, even when the charges against you were like, oh, by a court of your peers, you know, for better, for worse in some cases, because I think there are cases where like people who are innocent are found not guilty, but there are also times where people who are guilty are found out not guilty because of circumstances. Maybe there was a lack of evidence, or just something wasn't handled or presented properly during the investigation or trial type of thing. Like, there's just a multitude of things, right? So in this case, we know David didn't do it, but what will he do? So he decides that he's going to go along with it because, you know, carrying that with you, like, oh, once you finally get out of prison, it's like, but people will be like, well, he pleaded guilty, so obviously he did it. Once again, even if he pleads not guilty and he gets found guilty, they're still going to be like, well, he did it. And, you know, so there's a little bit of a catch-22 to it all. Because of the phone records that Mo was staring at, it led to Bosch going to the jewelry store, because it turns out Lexi had called them. She called like some center's thing, and then like 14 minutes later called this repair shop, because this is the shop she was going to get the watch repaired or something like that. Or she called the repair people and then called the people who own the pawn shop for it. Because it turns out the pawn, because I was thinking like, okay, did Vince get the watch? And because I thought like, okay, we know the dirty cops sell jewelry and stuff, so I was like, did they take it off Alexi and try to pawn it at this place? This is the place where Vince bought it to give to Lexi. So I was like, okay, so maybe Vince isn't involved like I thought. I don't know, still can't fully let that go. But part of me wonders, is that why Lexi was chosen? Is it because like they had to take the watch because it's like, well, if the watch was found, you'd find out that it was actually belongs to someone else from a previous crime or something? I mean, these cops are like bleeding people dry. Like, because there's that, I don't know, he's kind of, I guess, a doctor for the rich, because I think a woman was kind of like maybe get some filler for her lips. And he turns out he owes them money. He wants it at least by the end of the week, but they're like, no, you got till the day after tomorrow. Because they're almost saying like, oh, like he's like, oh, this isn't fair. They're like, really? You want to talk about fair? Once again, it's so interesting that they're on the high ground, but I guess they're like, they view themselves a little bit as Robin Hoodish, where it's like, oh, if you weren't dirt bags, we wouldn't have any dirt on you. So it's like, we're kind of stealing from pieces of shit. So that's why I'm like, are they not as involved with the Lexi? Like, they are connected to the Lexi situation because they are trying to cover it up later on. So did something go wrong? Like, what happened? That's why I'm like, do they know Vince and they owed him a favor, so they made David take the fall for whatever reason? Like I said, did he? I just don't know. I feel like I can't let go of the thing is that Vince might have some involvement in this. Like, he has the right to be defensive like he was about Bosch last episode showing up at his place, but it just felt too defensive. Once again, he started going a little aggro, being like, oh yeah, put your hands on the trunk, roof and let me search you. And Bosch is like, yeah, I'm not going to let that happen. So, I don't know. But either way, Bosch went to go see the people about it, and the guy's just kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't handle that. Person she most likely talked to might have been my brother. So, cause Bosch also noticed it when like the guy stepped. I think his name is Peter. So he had stepped and heard the wood, and it's like, well, we as the audience know the safe is there, but so does the bad guys, but they never did anything about it. I mean, to be fair, they were told like, right, it only opens up at a certain point, like it's on a timed lock, so you'd have to, which I don't know if that's true or if that's 100% BS, because they didn't bother stealing from it at all when they show up later on, because obviously they're following Bosch. They see him show up at the place, and it's like, right, he's getting too close. Eventually, we'll have to do this, and the other cop is like, yeah, but we're not there yet. So I'm interpreting that as we might have to put him down, and regardless of it all, we don't want to, for one, kill a veteran cop, because like we're cops, but and doing some shady shit, but we're not cops who kill our fellow cops. Even if he's an ex-cop, he might be on the dark side. That's not what we are all about. I mean, maybe I'm giving him a little too much like belief, because maybe at the end of the day, it's not about him being a cop or former cop that they're reluctant about. It is purely because he is someone of note that it's going to be draw unnecessary attention to their deal. So they end up killing like Peter and his brother and making it look like a robbery. So, but once again, all the stuff in the safe is fine. I guess they just felt like they couldn't do anything about it. So who knows if they were lied to about all the timer and everything. I mean, because it did seem like there was just but I mean, to be fair, when we saw it being closed up, all we saw was it being closed. So we have no idea, like, maybe it really is set on a time release. But Bosch did hear the creaking in the woods. So when he comes back here to investigate later, he'll probably know to kind of look for that safe. And they'll probably try and crack that open. And not less, because we don't know currently what department they actually work for, the two dirty cops, because they could be the ones that end up I mean, if they were homicide, but they're not, but maybe they would be the ones who catch the case, because I mean, like I said, my initial thought was like they've got to be part of like narcotics or something, but maybe not. But if it like somehow end up catching this case, that's going to be interesting, because once again, we are now under Chandler and Bosch are still under the impression now, like, right, they're looking for two killers, but also Chandler slightly she will remember her too, like the cops who kept her like and locked her up. So all we need is some of those connected threads connecting her to them, and them potentially getting connected to all of this. There being two of them, because Bosch also found out James, like up in like 7 years ago, like James was constantly getting trouble for all of this, and then like 3 years ago, suddenly just all of it disappeared. So they're like, okay, he's somebody's off the books CI type of situation. So definitely leaning into like him having some guardian angel. They just don't know who yet, but now it's like maybe this ties into the two people that ended up carrying his body to a different location after they murdered him. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episodes. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good